everyone aware we're going to record just so we can have good notes and everything for the review.
Okay.
I'm just going to share the screen. I'm sorry, I'm trying to find it here so everyone can kind of visually see the agenda. Okay. And so Eric, go ahead. I know this was this kind of just wanted to have that up there just to as reference. So.
Okay. Well, everyone, at our last meeting, we just kind of wanted to do what we, kind of loosely called homework. I know a lot of you are familiar with your own areas where you live, but just wanted to maybe see if people had a chance to get out, go visit some of the other areas and you can see this item 2, some of the key areas that we're going to talk about today, and just have some general discussions, and then we'll move to some other areas on our next meeting. But did anyone have a chance to kind of go out, just look at other areas and see if you noticed that there was anything that looked like short-term rental ordinances, or just areas that, appear that maybe knowing what you know from having these meetings and what you know about STRs and things like that, would be someplace that you noticed it or didn't think they would, be a viable option to be in those areas. So does anybody have any discussion or input that they want to share with any of their homework or visiting areas other than where they normally live? And
Nothing for me, Dan.
My only comment on areas that they would be appropriate, I feel that STRs can be appropriate in all areas of the city with proper registration, regulation, and restriction.
All right, thanks, Robert. Anyone else have anything that they want to add before we move on to a specific district focus?
Yeah, this is Thomas Tiffin, Blue River Homeowner Association. I travel quite a bit, travel with my family. Hotels are expensive, so we do look into, and quite often, most of our vacation time is spent in short-term rentals in other cities and parts of the nation here. It seems like we've always been fortunate, I guess, on where we stay. But typically there's many short-terms around us. We've done stuff in the Florida Keys. They've done a great job down there, Marathon for one, but they do have a restoration program. But also they control the short-term rentals and making sure that the restrictions that the city places on them, they're checked. Last time we were there, we had one people come up from the city and check on us. Just make sure that we knew the rules. So we've spent total of 3 summers out there now, and very rarely do we have any issues with anyone around us. There are in other short terms, but there is a lot of restriction. So, I see a need for short terms. It's a viable option for a lot of people, but it's also something that brings revenue into a city if it's done correctly. So that's my experience so far.
All right, great. So we'll go ahead and move on to specific district focus, and go ahead, Dan. Here we go.
Okay. Everyone see the map now? Just changed, hopefully for y'all too.
Yeah, it looks good.
Okay. And so on today, we just wanted to hit it. I know last time we covered kind of the island and part of Flower Bluff. So today we wanted to move through kind of the northwest kind of downtown and some of the west side areas, and same type of discussion. If there was any kind of neighborhoods or areas that that we should look to exclude or shouldn't are good candidates for short-term rental. I will say that just in our working and looking at this issue for over the last year, we've kind of looked at the different websites and postings and kind of see where the concentration was. We really haven't seen a whole lot in the Northwest. Obviously the Northwest area is, we have a pretty big gap with the airport and a lot of industrial focus, and there's a pretty big gap before you kind of get to the downtown. So, I don't know that a whole lot of visitors are staying out there. Maybe it's more geared to folks that will be working on any plant or industrial type activity, but we don't see that same concentration. But still, there is some. We do see a few rentals over the last year, but definitely not as much as I think other parts of the city. So, with that said, I guess, is there any feedback on any particular areas that we should look, or any neighborhoods that may not be appropriate?
Dan, do we have anybody on the committee that resides in the Northwest area or close to?
Yeah, I think Mr. Tiffin, he represents a neighborhood out there, and then
I do. I'm Cynthia.
yeah, I thought one of our
Great.
planning commissioners, right? That lives out there.
I reside out here. And there's not a lot that I can think of the Northwest. The only thing that I can think of sometimes that may benefit the short-term rentals is when we have like turnarounds for the refineries that people need to come and work for several months. I'm not really a lot familiar with the short-term rentals out here. I know that there are a lot more extents over there by the island in Flower Bluff. I've heard a lot of information about it from residentials and from those who own short-term rentals. So I'm just listening in to get a real good picture of pros and cons. Personally, being that we are a tourist city because of our beach, I think that's something that is expected to happen. I know that I've always rented out when I go stay at the Frio River, and those are considered short-term rentals as well, those homes out there. And I've been doing that for years, and I would not want to stay at a hotel while I'm staying and enjoying the Frio River. I prefer a little house. So I'm just listening in to a lot of the information because I don't live out at the island. I do go visit the island. I go stay at a condo or little cabin every now and then with my family. So this is great information to know because I believe that we need to figure out the best way to provide these short-term rentals in a structural manner for the benefit of our city. And as a planning commissioner, I have to think on what is the best thing for the growth of our city. And I mean, I agree with a lot of those that live next door to one. I would not want my home next door to someone that is having a wild party and I have children. I see that. I totally agree with that. But on the other hand, we need to figure out a way on how we can handle this to benefit our city, because we are a tourist city for our beaches out here, our beautiful area. And a lot of people do come down here for vacations. So I just want to say that. That's it.
Thank you. And I'll reiterate, as everybody's kind of mentioned and can glean, STRs serve a lot of different types of needs. Sometimes more business oriented and long-term work type things to the tourist things. So that's why we're going through this process with you all in the STR ordinance development, is because we're looking at the city as a whole and trying to create an ordinance that can be administered throughout the city wherever it is, whether it's in a less likely place, more business oriented, where there's likely to be parties and those types of things, but also have the regulatory control and framework in place for those areas that are deemed where STRs can go in single family, where it is more touristy, where you might have more of those potential issues. So I just want to reiterate again, that's why we're looking at it as a community as a whole. So back to you, Dan.
Yeah, if there's no other comments on the northwest, I can move us kind of to the downtown. And what I threw up another layer here, the blue lines are what we kind of identify as our area development plan district boundaries. So the downtown is whatever, everyone considers kind of down there along the seawall, but of course the Staples corridor and some of the neighborhoods in and around City Hall, and then the North Beach is also included in the downtown district. And so this district is pretty unique in that it's kind of a mix of different housing. We have some duplex, triplex, quadplex, some larger apartments and condos, and we really have a variety of different types of zoning within the downtown as well. So you have a lot of single family that's in multifamily zoning, and some even in commercial that may be kind of grandfathered at this point. But and so the downtown, to be honest, allows, if we're going to stay with the idea that that single family homes in commercial districts, that's okay. For the most part, downtown is in compliance, or you could really operate short-term rentals in most of the downtown area by right, because most of them aren't in single family zone districts. And that applies for the most part to North Beach as well. Almost all of North Beach is zoned, commercial and a mix of kind of a tourism district, other than this piece over here on the west side. There's some more standard single family home that was on the west side of the highway. And so that would be your only real standard kind of single family that you'd find in this area. So, and of course the interest is high in the downtown. We do find, when we're looking at the maps over the last year, that there's definitely an interest to be closer into the downtown with some of the STR use. And so there's not as much single family zoning. So I don't know if there's any comments or if anyone has any thoughts on the downtown, if there's anything that should be excluded in this area. And that line here this is kind of the Morgan Avenue is kind of the south boundary. And so these neighborhoods just north of Morgan, if you drive through them, you definitely will see kind of a mix. There's a single family and that duplex, or you're even seeing a lot of office now too, with medical and attorneys that are converting a lot of this. So it's really, we've had an investment of an apartment complex down near the Ed Cruz Tennis Center in that vicinity. So we're seeing a lot of good investment in this area and a mix of uses that seems to be working well.
And Dan, do you think those mix of uses, is that mix of uses between residential and then professional office type use? Is that what you're meaning by that? It's not, most of it's converting away from straight single family to more of light commercial office type uses.
Yeah, we're seeing a fair number of those conversions, attorney and or medical. A lot of the investment, we have huge investment by the hospital here recently in that area. And so we're seeing a lot of medical offshoot from that. And so the homes are converting, but then we're also seeing more higher density, not higher density, but 3 and 4 unit kind of projects that are being fixed up, we have actually 2 or 3 new projects in this area. So it's all working, I think, very well together. So.
And that's fantastic. You want to see redevelopment in areas, and I don't think STRs are any detriment to that kind of thing, because if the market's not there, then and it's more for architect or professional office, then converting the office to an Airbnb or something, that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, we would certainly, it's in pockets at the moment. We would definitely like to see that kind of continue into some of the areas. We're looking at Staples Street now, and hopefully we'll see more investment there that will kind of make its way back into some of those neighborhoods. But it's definitely the focus now, I think, is more towards the hospital, and hopefully that will kind of stretch north, and then some from the downtown. So hopefully they'll kind of meet here in the middle. But yeah, I agree that I don't see the STR kind of in these neighborhoods as any kind of detriment.
And if they were, they might, there might be some need for people that are in acute care or a longer extended stay at the hospital would utilize the STRs if they did kind of occur. in those areas of single family that still exist around there.
Yeah, I agree. A lot of those could be for hospital related type stays.
Because as we can see over the, if you look over the past 5, 10, 15 years, even STRs have kind of evolved in those that want to use them well beyond just vacationing type things. So looking down the road, you could imagine that there's probably going to be more recognition of it and other primary uses that are going to be near where they're going to be utilized.
All right. Any feedback? Any other comments for related downtown?
We might have one from Elkie. She was having trouble with her microphone. I'm not sure if she got that worked out.
Okay, we can give her a second to try, or we can, when she jumps back on, we can always backtrack a little bit. Elkie, are you talking? Because I think you're on mute still.
Yeah, she is. Elkie,
Oh, she's there.
if you will, Elkie, if you will send those comments to Dan in the chat, he can share them with everybody out loud. And I'd rather do that, Eric, before we move on.
Sure, absolutely.
Now, if they're in the chat, I might not be able to see them. So I'm in the kind of the split screen mode, so I'm not sure if I'm seeing everything.
They're not in there yet. They're not in the chat yet.
Okay, I just saw it. Did you see it, Dan?
No.
It came up and then it vanished. So I mean, I read it, but where did it go? Let me see if I can get it back up. I think she said, I just wanted to make sure I understand STRs are allowed in the downtown area for SFH. So that was her question.
Yeah, it's a mixed match of zoning that, I can produce a map, but it is a mixed match of zoning in the downtown area in this kind of boundary. But most of it is not the RS, 4 or the 6. And so it for the most part is all permitted in this area. I can produce a map for you to kind of give you an idea, but yeah, for the most part, it's a legal use today.
So, but just to make sure everybody understands, Elkie, it's a legal use today because it's not zoned single family.
And there is a lot of the zoning districts that do allow single family development. And so that's why a single family home can end up in a district outside of just your typical single family. Okay, the next area was the west side, which make up kind of, here's the boundary here. I-37 is the.
Dan, hold on a second. Elkie said another one. She says, so there are single family homes that can short-term rent. Technically, no, not at this time, not even in that particular area yet. That's what this process is to establish. Does that answer your question, Elkie? The last part was right now, no, they're not supposed to be in single family. That's what we're going through the process right now, is to establish regulatory things over there for single family, no matter where they are.
All right. Anything else for downtown? All right. So west side area, the most part is kind of bound by the I-37. We have a few neighborhoods on the north side there. And then NPID makes up the west boundary, and then it comes down Old Brownsville to Saratoga, and then Crosstown is kind of the east boundary. So a lot of older neighborhoods, a lot of course, industrial on Agnes and kind of the old Brownsville area. But a lot of older neighborhoods, golf course, a lot of nice parks in this area. Certainly, obviously, a lot of single family, some newer single family. Is hopefully there's some interest in some of these properties out here for some new single family. But so definitely a growing district, but older, of course. Any concerns, any issues for any of these neighborhoods?
Can y'all hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You sure you don't want to just keep typing chats and let me read them? Just gotta see if I can see you because okay. I don't think there's any more question or any more. Is there any more? Again, is there any more comment or thought on this particular area?
Dan, is there a south side section, or was that lumped in with the island?
No, we thought maybe we'd cover those next time.
Oh, okay,
But
gotcha.
we definitely have the south side, and then it needs to be changed. We'd actually change the name. It says Midtown here on the map, but we're going to call that Bayside moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if there's no comments on West Side, we'll. I know we wanted to jump to another part of the presentation here. All right, so let me pull up my PowerPoint here. All right, so this next item, we just wanted to show two locations that in Texas, just to kind of give you an idea of some of their regulations that they utilize. Luckily, we have Michael Dice on the call, so he's kind of a San Antonio expert, so he'll fill in where I missed something here. But we first want to just talk a little bit. A lot of cities identify the types of units, and it's pretty consistent across the board in the kind of the naming that we've found. And so these different types are, one is kind of an owner occupied situation where they may live on the property and they rent a room or maybe a garage apartment or accessory dwelling unit that's on the property. And so the owner is always there. And so I think cities have looked at that as maybe a situation that there could be more flexibility in because of the owner being there, that there's more control, that there's a little more latitude in where that can occur versus a type 2, where most cities have kind of described that as where the owner is off premise, that they don't live there, and they just own the property, and then they're basically renting the entire unit to the visitor. And so in those we've found, or at least, the San Antonio and some of the other models we've looked at, the rules for those are a little bit different. The regulations are a little tighter on those type 2 units versus the type 1. So just wanted to, if was there any feedback that could be a direction that you looked at in kind of a single family area where you may look at these two different scenarios a bit different.
And
I have a
during
question. So right here on type 1, right, it says owner leasing occupied property. Homeowner lives on site and rents just like either a private room, an ADU, a garage apartment. Where would the homeowner that actually normally occupies the residence for the majority of the time, but maybe leaves for the weekend, fall in? Because type 2 just says they don't occupy their property as a primary residence.
most cases, I believe it's probably still type 1 because they're there well beyond 30 days or what would be typically a lease time frame. So not less than 30 days, which is what more of STRs are geared towards. So as long as they're there, like, we'd have to come up with definitions probably with Buck and everybody, but, I think most of them from best practices, it's if you live there a majority of the time, and that's fine. But there might be weeks that you don't want to be around during, well, up here it would be like race week or something. Someone just rents out their whole home and they leave so they can get money for the master bedroom too. but that still is a type 1 because that's where their mill goes and that's where they live.
Thank
It's
you.
not, okay.
I think a lot of places will describe it like primary residence versus, I don't know, secondary, or I don't know how they actually describe it.
In San Antonio, we allowed if it was your homesteaded property through the tax credit.
And of course, during the phase 1 stuff where we're already working through the registration, they'll register if this goes forward as a methodology for this part of the ordinance, they would register under one or the other. And so if we find out that they're absent or they don't have those other mechanisms that classified as being an owner occupied, then it would kick them to the type 2 and those regulatory controls would be administered. Is that right? Every staff, that's how I'm seeing it would be.
Right, we could amend the ordinance to establish a type 1 or type 2.
Any other feedback on this? This is just, I think, one method that we've seen it kind of across the board that just allows more flexibility, allows for basically the type 1 to be used a whole lot more in more places versus the type 2, where the type 2, I think we've seen to be, more limitations on the percentage or density of those types within a single family area.
I mean, I think this type of layout ordinance regulation makes a lot of sense. As you say, I operate one where I'm on site, 24/7. It's my homestead, and I host guests in a private wing with a separate entrance of my home. So, if you want to say the police are on site, so we can police our guests if there's any unruliness or late night partying, we can enforce that. Of course, we already have strict house rules and have done this successfully for 2 years. Then your type 2, where the owner is not present. So those are going to be, if we were to head this direction, that would be the type of STR that does need a lot more regulation and restriction, because there's no one on site, to police that. And, neighboring residents can not act as police, but they can help be the watchdog, as a lot of the island residents are already doing. Anyway, we can talk about that, I guess, further later. But I mean, this type of approach, to me, I sent some information to the city on my thoughts, and it was kind of in line with this type of ordinance.
And I will say we appreciate y'all, everybody that has sent stuff. We do look through it and read it. And we are kind of keeping track of it and looking through it. And we appreciate y'all because it shows that everyone's doing some of their own, research, because it's become a lot more prevalent. It's pretty easy to do a Google search and, find some stuff on it, or just, but we have all that put together and we look through it to see what it has in it to add to this discussion.
All right. And then so moving on from the types, we wanted to show just 2 examples of what the cities are doing here in Texas. Now there's a bunch more, and we may talk about some of the others maybe in some future meetings, but we did want to talk about 2 that are fairly different. And again, we're lucky we have Michael Dice on the call, so again, he can kind of help out with some of the San Antonio one here, and probably all the others. I know he's done a lot of research, but the San Antonio, they do use the 2 types. So they have a type 1 and a type 2, and they have different regulations for both. So the type 1, pretty flexible. You can do that type in most of the zoning districts. And the type 2 does have some limitations to 12.5% of the block face. And that was really, I think, I'm going to tell you, it's just to limit the density, the number, the saturation that you could find maybe on a particular block. The city of Arlington, a bit different. They didn't necessarily have the different unit types. They've kind of just lumped them together. And what Arlington has done, they've created a kind of an overlay or a zone around their entertainment complex, Cowboys, Rangers, and Six Flags area. So they've kind of created this 1 mile zone and created this boundary, and that's the only area where you can do single family short-term rental. So they don't allow short single family homes in any other part of the city to do it, only in that 1 mile kind of grid. And then they do allow it citywide in some of their other zoning districts, but it's more of their medium density, which is, to me, it sounded a whole lot like a townhome kind of a district, and an apartment district they allow for it, and then most of their commercial districts would allow for it. So two kind of different approaches to allow it. I think Arlington kind of looked into it and did some studies, and they found most of the demand was in and around their entertainment complex. It made a lot of sense. People want to walk and be close to the ball games and the amusement. And these are just two slides that kind of just highlight. I don't want to get too in depth with it, but just the idea of looking at a block face and kind of identifying, the type and how many maybe one could do. So, maybe you only are allowed to do one or two on an average type block face in San Antonio of the type 2 variety. But of course, the type 1, more flexibility. And then, of course, here's kind of just a look at that entertainment zone that was identified in Arlington, where you have their 3 main venues. And then this is kind of the boundary that would allow for any of the single family neighborhoods to do it. So if you're outside of this zone in single family, you can't do it. And so if there's not a whole lot of single family, you can kind of look at just the aerial. There's some here, some across the highway. And then one, of course, here in the south. But that was just two approaches that the two different cities took. Of course, there's 100 different ways cities have done it across the country, but we just wanted to highlight those two.
Dan, I have a question. Can you define block face? What is that like? If I look at my block from a major street to another major street, is it all of my neighbors down the block and then the street behind me? So the homes that back up to me on the next street, is that considered a block face?
And Michael, are you on the call? And if so,
So in San Antonio, we actually had the actual block face itself. So if you bring up that slide 5, that determined one side of the street and other side of the street. So each side of the street was its own block face.
And that's from intersection to intersection or block, right?
Correct. Now we had numerous discussions about what should be the length, and that's kind of where we got to the density level. Is based on an old B&B ordinance, things had to be a certain distance apart. But we realized block faces weren't 300 feet or 500 feet or 1,000. They were more like 150. So we generically defined it as between intersections consisting of one block face. If it was a very extensive long street, then at that point you could have breakups in between. But the main thing was to address each side of the street, and then as we discussed, down from a distance requirement to a percentage, because we started through our research and the STR providers that were in our meetings, we started to see that most of them were closer to those intersection nodes than they were actually spread out throughout the neighborhood. But that's kind of where we landed.
It's like Dan mentioned, there are several other ones, but those two are kind of the two examples of kind of two major aspects that are sort of different. And then a bunch of them fall in between the two. Not many have done like Arlington, where they restricted to just a zone like that. Then there's others like Waco that actually have more than just two types. They have like 3, but they kind of start encompassing more of the definition of what a bed and breakfast compared to short-term rental and other elements are. We're trying to keep it more focused.
Yeah, we've seen, in research too, the kind of a buffering where one unit goes in and then there's a certain separation from the next one. Is also a method that we've seen other cities use. So you may have one go in here, but then they have kind of a 400 or 1,000 square foot circle around them, and then you can't do another one within that. So that kind of spaces them out. But yeah, Arlington is unique. I haven't seen really many like the Arlington. Any questions or comments about either, I guess, the tiers or I guess maybe the approach that San Antonio has used?
All right.
I know going back to, I guess, the agenda, as far as, we just wanted to look at the best practices, and then as far as introduction of any regulations, I mean, that's kind of, I think, the start, at least, is kind of looking at those different types and options, and then as far as, the percentage, if that was a direction, as far as moving forward and developing any kind of drafts.
And that's kind of how that's what we talked about. That's kind of how I see it going too. So we're not really necessarily introducing anything in drafts right now, but we are going to, start that process with the feedback that we've gotten now to try to start drafting that based on some of the feedback we got today on the different frameworks that were shown, examples. If anybody has any more thoughts as you kind of digest it or see, go and see some more in depth on those if you want to, and have some thoughts on it, then please email it to us. And always if thoughts come to your mind later on after something like that, you think about that in the meeting. It's never too late to give us feedback and your thoughts on it through emails to staff.
So thoughts on, say, San Antonio or Austin, some of these other cities that have passed ordinances that allow STRs in single family residence of the type 2 where it's not owner occupied, and the density percent, say 12.5%, 15%, whatever it might be. Once that, what occurs when that limit is reached in a block face and a new resident comes in and they want to short-term rent their residence? Is it how has that been handled by? Is it a wait list until there's an opening?
Well, San Antonio actually, as part of the ordinance, provided a process through the Board of Adjustment, which would provide notification within 200 feet of all neighbors to allow basically an exemption to the 12.5% density. So it basically goes, if you're familiar with Board of Adjustment, they review the UDC and then they can give exemptions based on certain criteria that have to be met that the owner presents. And then again, it's a public hearing, people would speak for or against it. And then it's up to ZBA here in Corpus to actually do that if they were to do it. But in San Antonio, it was called BOA. And then based on that, I actually I'm looking at all their cases over the last 3 years. They've only had 20 cases go to Board of Adjustment since 2019. So it doesn't happen that often, but it does provide an option if you were to hit that 12.5% density.
So can you give me an example of a typical block? If we have a typical block face in Corpus Christi, how many homes would represent on typical block face, say 12.5% density? Is that?
Well, again, it's hard to say. It's hard to say typical because all streets are different.
Okay.
The way that SA defined it, the actual terming definition was block face means one side of a block with no intervening streets. because blocks may have intervening cross streets and not penetrate both block faces, blocks may have more than 2 block faces. So it allowed, the easy math is 12 homes, you could have basically 1 home that could have it. When we talk units, especially in higher density type areas that may have a primary residence and a ADU or a garage apartment, or in some cases, again, more cities or older areas that have multiple, back in the day, they have a garage with 3 apartments and a main residence. So it gave that ability to count all those units in that street or on that block face to be counted.
Okay.
So it's unique based on whichever area.
Okay, thanks.
So if the city were to adopt an ordinance that has that percentage tied to it, how would that impact the area, I guess, of where it's allowed on the island? Would it, I guess, decrease the amount of short-term rentals available?
Well, if we were talking specifically for type 1, type 2, yes, it would have, that's what the limitation was in place for in San Antonio, to make sure that entire, if you're familiar with San Antonio, King William District, which is downtown, there were a number of homes in the King William District that had been bed and breakfasts, now were short-term rentals, and they were starting to proliferate in that neighborhood. There was a big push to kind of limit that almost overrun in specific single neighborhoods, and that limitation helped prevent that. So it would limit the number within an area. That's the whole reason that we
But that, Michael, that was just for the single family zoned areas?
Showing is still on, but I don't know if he lost his video or his audio. I think one of the other things we'll look at happens is if we have those and someone has the permit to do it, what happens if the ownership changes, they sell that home and there's someone next door would still, if that one transfers or not, if it runs with the actual property.
If Mike lost his microphone, it's
I
non-transferable.
think it's back now.
Oh, good, good, good. He's more of an expert. I'm just trying to, hone my skills.
Yeah, we did, again, it wouldn't be transferable because each owner would have to apply, much like any other type of permit. And again, it would be consistent based on the type. If a type 1 is requiring a homestead and they were to move, the new owner may not be a homesteaded owner. So we wanted, from a San Antonio level, we wanted to ensure that we verified every owner that came in.
And so it could switch. I mean, if someone comes in new and they don't want to do it, they just want to own their home, they don't want to do an STR, it'd lower the percentage and would open up the availability for someone else in that particular area. It's
Correct.
kind of almost, on an extreme example would be like alcohol permits in New Mexico. There's only so many per county. And the only way you can open up a convenience store selling alcohol is either pay $1 million and buy it from somebody else, or just you don't have it until they close and you get an opportunity to snag it. So not exactly the same, but kind of a situation that can happen where someone might have it and someone else might want to do it, but they can't because the criteria aren't filled up, the percentages allowed in that area, they sell. That might open up the opportunity for someone else that lives there that wants to do it.
And we were just confirming that's only single family homes in San Antonio with the percentages, or just overall short-term rental?
There are some limitations for apartments, but that is, I'm actually looking through the ordinance right now. That's
12.5.
more specific to, that's more specific to, trying to remember, there was one particular apartment case we were dealing with, but yeah, it goes to apartments as well.
Okay.
All right. Is there anything else?
No, I didn't have any more information to cover.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. This is Barbara again. I may have missed something, but if you have the 12%, what happens if they're all right next to each other? Is there a certain distance between them that's required?
Not in San Antonio. That we went from a distance. Originally, the first couple of drafts of the ordinance, we were looking at a 300-foot distance, and then the councilman for downtown, specifically for his area, wanted to change it to that 12.5% because through research we found that they were closer to more of the commercial areas and the cross streets than they were spread out. So that would allow for those to kind of stay in those areas closer to the commercial areas. So it wouldn't be, if the thought process from the council office was if we put a distance of 300 feet, it would then spread them out throughout the neighborhood. Whereas if they hit that percentage and they're done, that's all that they have. And the majority of ones that San Antonio had were closer to those commercial intersections.
In an RS6, you
Oh,
don't want them clustered.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, in an RS6, you don't want them clustered. There, one there.
I did have a question that I meant to ask earlier, but my mic was not working. And so with the rental registration that has just passed, is there any kind of education that we're offering to those people that are registering as short-term rentals, like how to be a good short-term renter or anything that we're doing for those owners?
We have, I mean, of course, we're kind of just working through the software and getting people registered, but we do provide, within the ordinance, it did require a lot of information that be placed within the unit. I think that helps a lot with, a lot of some of those issues for visitors to the community about city rules and, complex kind of regulations for trash and that kind of thing. But as far as, you're talking about like a training for the owners of the units that just, I don't know that we have anything like set up exactly like that, but just the information that we're requiring within the ordinance to be provided in a unit, I think does a pretty good job of that. But I don't know if that was something, Mike, that you found you guys had to follow up with after it was in place, any kind of training for owners?
Not necessarily for owners. I think the platforms do a pretty good job of relating what is required in the area for regulation. What we ended up having was public meetings on discussing what the short-term rental ordinance does, the things about short-term rentals. The slide that you provided, we use that to describe, how things were to lots of neighborhood associations, homeowner associations. So everybody could understand in more layman's terms what the short-term rental ordinance actually is. But through the registration process, telling the STR provider the things that need to be provided to the tenant, be it trash, parking, noise, having that consistency in providing that information definitely helps because it wasn't obviously required before. So anybody entering that will now have that information right at their unit. So they'll have that information, but that's something definitely that we can look at. Like I said, I know that the platforms do a pretty good job of discussing the ordinance and any regulations in whatever cities.
Michael, have other cities that have enacted the regulation set up any kind of STR complaint hotline to make it easier to report the nuisance short-term rental houses? My suggestion, like on the permit fee that the city has right now of $50. I mean, I operate an STR, and I think that fee is way too low. If we were to increase that permit fee, we could maybe do something with those funds to help, more adequately control or a reporting of the nuisance STRs, which really, to me, this whole group and this whole discussion, the heart of it is the nuisance short-term rentals, specifically on the island. And I just wondered if there's been any kind of a hotline used by other cities.
In some other cities, there were some specific numbers, but the overwhelming majority of cities that operate in a centralized customer contact like 311, pretty much what'll happen is they'll call 311, and that just makes it easy for all citizens to know, hey, I can call 311 for trash, I can call 311 for potholes, I can also call 311 for a short-term rental complaint. Those scripts would be done through that program. I don't know if communications has worked. We're getting a lot of questions in development services that we're answering through the FAQs that are online, and more particular zoning questions we're routing. But yeah, that would route through 311. It just makes it simple and easy for everybody to remember. And as you know, the fee was set by council. I believe an original proposal was a higher fee, and it was lowered at council, if I remember correctly. So those fees can always be looked at and readjusted. I'm sure that's a council action.
I completely agree with Mr. Shrugs about the fee. The amount of secretarial work and issues like that are gonna have to be handled by administration in the city. $50 is no way gonna cover any of that. So I believe that's a ridiculous amount. Thank you.
And Dan, you can probably speak to this, but I know signage is on the ordinance for like how many occupants and parking spaces should be used, right? So maybe on that same sign, there could be like a phone line that people can call, like, are we being too loud? Are we breaking the rules? Just to have like transparency for neighbors. I don't know how that could work, but just a thought.
Is there any number of permits that have been applied for or have already been granted? Do we have information on that?
Andrea, do you know if they provided you a count today?
I haven't received one today, Michael, but I have been receiving those, Ms. Agan.
And how many?
Dan and Bonnie should have the most up-to-date numbers. Do you have those,
Right.
Dan?
Sorry, this is Dan. My computer actually died right there.
Okay, hold on, I'll get
But I
them
don't know
for
if
you.
there was a question for me there that I missed, but
She
hopefully Mike
was,
will answer that.
yeah, Miss Agan was asking what the total number of permits have been granted so far since we went active with the registration requirement.
I didn't see an update today. Michael, do you have that by any chance? I know as I think Tuesday or Wednesday, I think it was 41.
Yeah, I don't know if she's in the office right now.
41, that's okay. It doesn't have to be exactly to this minute, but we're just curious about the number that are happening. And is there a general area that these are mostly being granted?
Well, the requirement is only for the island in Flower Bluff right now.
Okay.
And so I know I've talked to a property manager who has quite a bit over like 200, and he's still trying to kind of get all the information together. So he's he's well aware. He's just trying to get everything he needs, and then I think we'll be submitting. So we know, I guess there's people out there that are wanting to submit. They just have to get all the info needed to get it in the system is all.
So
We receive,
if there's a person who wants 200, is that just going to have to be one permit, or is he going to have to get 200 permits?
200. He'll have to apply for
200.
each unit. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Thank you for the information.
So I have a follow-up question to Barbara's. So they won't actually be granted a permit until after phase 2, correct? After the entire ordinance is drafted and voted on?
Well, the folks on and we're just talking about legally operating ones in non-single family areas on the island and in Flower Bluff. And so they can get a permit now. They can, if they meet all the qualifications, submit all the required information, they can get a permit today. And that's your commercial, multifamily, tourist zoning areas only, no single family.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Okay, and so somebody had asked me because we're in like a short-term rental group. She's a single family home operator. Was there a grace period? So I believe she did receive a citation. Was there any type of grace period?
Not for those that are operating in a single family zone. There's no grace period. Because those are not permissible currently. And as of Monday, Ms. Agan, there were 37 permits that were requested. 35 of those were approved and 2 of them were disapproved as they were in single family zones. That was as of Monday. I know Yvette's been reporting those from DSD, Michael, directly to Code as well as Dan. So I haven't been seeing the daily totals, but I did get that as of Monday. So.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
just to clarify, one of the denials was in Flower Bluff and one of the denials was on the island. So it was denials from both sides.
And just to add to Amanda's, in our short-term rental group, we did have a fellow operator who has received a mailed citation from the city in violation. So requesting that she, appear before municipal court. So I suppose that's the, I guess I'm asking, are those operators being found out by the software that you're utilizing to scrub some of the platform sites and looking for that permit number?
I'll have to check on that, Robert, but I don't believe so. Typically, those would be based off of a complaint, but I'll double check on that particular one. If you'll send me an email, I'll look at the address for you. And
I'm just
let you
curious.
know. Yes. But just remember, everyone that's operating an STR in a single family zone is doing so illegally right now, whether you're on the island or not.
Andrea, I've got a question.
Yes.
Will owners of short-term rentals with permits, is that public information? Can we go someplace at some point and look up who has that permit? Sort of like a business permit in the city.
That's actually a good idea, Mr. Jones, and I think I will work with staff and see if we can't get a list put on that STR webpage so that y'all can go look anytime you want to. We can keep that updated. So I'll look into that, sir, and see if we can't get that on there. But you could also, if you wanted to, submit an open records request for the information through the city secretary's office.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
All right, Dan, I think I would just mention, we had 3 focus areas today, and then what our next ones would be, so that if folks want to go drive through or visit those between now and our next meeting, they could probably do that. So
Yeah, I think next time would be the Bayside and South Side. I think that kind of would wrap it up. as far as looking at different areas within the city.
So Dan, just to make sure everybody knows, when you say Bayside and Southside, if you could give them some parameters for what is typically included in those areas.
Sure. The Bayside basically has a boundary of, if you can kind of envision Morgan Avenue as kind of the west, which is Spahn Hospital on the shoreline there. And then, of course, the Bay would be the north boundary, and Ennis Jocelyn would be your east, and then SBID, and then parts of Crosstown as it kind of would merge into Morgan would be your west boundary. And then if you could kind of mirror that, the south side would basically be everything south of SPID. West boundary is the Crosstown, and Oso Creek is your south boundary, and then the east boundary of the south side would be the Oso Bay.
All right.
And I think Dan mentioned at the very beginning of the call that we had an individual that resigned from the work group because she continues to run into some scheduling conflicts. So we will work to find a replacement, a suitable neighborhood focused replacement for her. But we certainly appreciate everyone's participation in our advisory group discussions, and hope that you are finding these group discussions to be beneficial. Staff appreciates those individuals, as Eric said earlier, that have submitted their input to us. We are reading them. Mr. Suggs can attest to that, because I had to ask him to send it in a different format so we could open it the other day. So please do continue to send that, and encourage anyone that may reach out to you or just, through the course of conversation, bring up STRs. Let them know that they're welcome as well to submit their comments to the city, and encourage individuals to watch that web page that we created for STRs. And Mr. Jones, I will work with staff on that list, because I do think that's an excellent idea, sir.
Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. And our next meeting will be 2 weeks from today at 3 o'clock. Are there any other questions or comments before we dismiss today?
Yes, is there a way that you could put the address for the website up? We've tried to find it and just couldn't do it. So if you could put that up at the end, that would be very helpful.
Miss Bonnie, can you put that in the chat for everybody? She just did.
Thank you.
You are welcome, Miss Agan.
All right. Thank you. Everybody have a fun and safe weekend.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.